This is 5 on 20 News, where the news is hot off the press and the newscasters have been let off the chain, with Luke Goodhart
and Joel Foster, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Tucson.
First, local headlines.
The U.S. Border Patrol is being accused of destroying video footage. The video allegedly shows terrible conditions of holding rooms in the Tucson area. Civil rights groups filed a motion to hold the Border Patrol in contempt of court and to appoint someone to oversee the patrol's handling of the tapes in 8 Tucson stations. The case began back in 2015 when the Arizona ACLU filed a suit against the Border Patrol, accusing them of holding inmates in improper conditions. Temporary facilities were said to be freezing and overcrowded with no access to food, water, medical care, or legal counsel. The judge in the 2015 case ruled that the Border Patrol would have to hand over footage. But a month later, the tapes were lost. The Border Patrol claimed that it was a problem with their digital systems and the footage was corrupted, but accidentally winked when they delivered the news. The judge condemned the agency for stonewalling on the footage. In November 2016, footage was again lost when there was another problem with a digital video recorder. This time, the problem was that the recording equipment was unplugged.
One Republican lawmaker in Arizona is so empowered by our incoming bigot president that he's begun the process of passing some racist laws of his very own. Representative Bob Thorpe of Flagstaff is proposing a law that would penalize state schools who offer in-state tuition to Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA students. DACA is the law that grants deportation relief to people who were brought to the U.S. as young children. Thorpe's legislation aims to oppose DACA and would hit colleges with a 10% cut in their state funding if they are found to violate this new proposed law. While Thorpe says that he's targeting colleges, his bill doesn't differentiate between colleges and K-12 schools who could also potentially be at risk. Oh, but Thorpe didn't put down the pen. He's got unrealized racist law ideas going back for decades. He's also proposing HB 2120, which would expand a state ban on ethnic studies programs in K-12 schools, universities, and community colleges. This would also be punishable by a 10% drop in funding and a 10% drop in cultural identity. It seems his hope for Arizona students is to hear about the brave defensive battles against the invading native marauders. Democratic Senator Martin Quezada said Thorpe's bills are, quote, scary stuff. You said it, Marty. Quezada pointed out that the bill would even affect events organized for Mexican Independence Day. Thorpe tried not to crack a smile when he said, and this is real, the intention of the bill is Martin Luther King. The strides we made in the 1960s, I think, are being diluted. You're right, they are being diluted. By you. This is a man who represented a state that refused to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. after it was declared a national holiday. Next up, Thorpe will look to honor Cesar Chavez by criminalizing labor unions in the state.
The old Pima County Courthouse is getting some upgrades, though not that big buck hunter machine they hoped for. The building is getting a new paint job meant to match the original 1929 design. A rehabilitation project by a county contractor uncovered the original color, which is similar to adobe, but over time the walls have turned pink from fading. Linda Myro of the Pima County Office of Sustainability and Conservation says, quote, we decided to bring it back to the 1929 intention, which makes sense because who wouldn't want to remember 1929? Make America roaring and riddled with gang violence again.
Tucson Medical Center is speaking out against the inevitable repeal of the Affordable Care Act. TMC CEO Judy Rich said that she's seen a big difference since the law's passage in 2010. She said fewer people are showing up sick to the emergency room because they now have proper health insurance that includes preventative care. Before the ACA, TMC had debts of $25 million from patients who didn't have insurance. The debt has dropped to $8 million since the law was passed. Rich warned that the law should not be repealed until there is a suitable replacement ready. On Tuesday, President-elect Donald Trump called for a swift repeal of the bill, which would be accompanied by a replacement. However, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan favors a slower approach, pointing out that a replacement will be difficult to accomplish in the timeline that Trump is proposing. Also, late Wednesday night, the Senate passed a law that would make it easier to repeal the law with a single vote, rather than a series of votes on different amendments.
The Tucson Jazz Festival began on January 13th, bringing 10 days of music to the Old Pueblo. 18 acts will perform for free downtown on Monday, MLK Day, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Because of the event, Fifth Avenue between Toole and Broadway will be closed off from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Monday. Last night, the festival began with a concert by saxophonist Kamasi Washington, who played on Kendrick Lamar's Grammy-winning album To Pimp a Butterfly. Throughout the 10 days, there will also be a blues brunch featuring performances from the Tucson Jazz Institute Ellington Band and other performers.
Some coffee shops in the Tucson area are feeling the effects of the recent minimum wage increase. The hike has resulted in some shops having to raise their prices. One example is Laverna's Coffee Shop, where a cup of coffee rose from $1.89 to $2.50. However, the owner, Rosa Blas, says that the price raise won't turn off her loyal customers. But other coffee shops remain optimistic about the wage hike. Jonathan Tehrani, owner of Coffee Exchange, says that while some younger people might skip that cup of joe, he was prepared to have to raise prices and thinks that customers will still come. Meanwhile, Coffee Times, a small popular drive-through shop on Speedway, proudly displays a sign outside that says there will be no price raises. Now in national and international news.
A U.S. government watchdog has launched an investigation into actions taken by the FBI during election season. The focus of the investigation is FBI Director James Comey's decision to reopen a case against Hillary Clinton 11 days before Election Day. Comey's decision came after the FBI found additional emails on the computer of disgraced Senator Anthony Weiner. Clinton was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, but not before the investigation turned public opinion against the candidate. The Clinton camp blames the investigation for her loss to Donald Trump. The watchdog, run by Department of Justice Inspector Michael Horowitz, will investigate whether Comey's decision was politically motivated. He said that he will focus on a July press conference where Comey said that the FBI would not recommend charges against Clinton. The Clinton campaign has long claimed that Comey's move was politically motivated, which is forbidden by U.S. law. Horowitz said that his investigation came in response to numerous requests from the public and members of Congress. While the issue of Clinton's emails never seems to go away, the good news is that after 9 investigations, we get one for free.
As one of his last acts in office, President Obama ended the wet foot, dry foot policy, which grants Cubans citizenship if they are able to successfully reach U.S. soil. Obama suddenly ended the controversial nearly 20-year-old policy that critics say favors one group of migrants over others. Obama addressed the issue, saying that, quote, "We are treating Cuban migrants the same way we treat migrants from other countries." Cuba has long argued that the policy encourages Cubans to make the treacherous 90-mile journey to the U.S., often in rickety rafts that have caused multiple deaths over the years. It is important to note that Obama's move comes at a time when the U.S. and Cuba have mended some of the ties between the two historically bitter rivals. Obama's Republican opponents, along with some Democrats, have criticized the kiss-and-make-up policy. They say that Cuba hasn't improved their human rights records enough to be brought back into the good graces of the U.S. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez said that Obama's move would tighten the noose the Castro regime continues to have around the neck of its people. Menendez was angry that Congress was not consulted before the president's decision. But other Democrats, such as Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy, praised the move as a step forward for relations between the U.S. and Cuba. The new ruling would also end an exemption by the Department of Homeland Security that expedited removals for Cubans caught near the U.S. border. Cubans are coming to the U.S. in droves as the number of Cuban migrants doubled from 2014 to 2015 as relations with the U.S. started to improve.
The UN Secretary General says that they are close to solving a long-simmering disagreement over the Cyprus border. Officials from Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, and the UK met in Geneva this week to discuss the issue, which Secretary General Antonio Guterres says is progressing rapidly. As part of the deal, the UK has already agreed to reduce its military bases by half. But Greece and Cyprus would like a new deal to include an agreement that Turkey will also reduce its troop numbers. Cyprus was once a British colony and still considers the country a protectorate. However, many Cypriots are uncomfortable with the British presence and would prefer they leave altogether. Cyprus has long been a divided country, with Cyprus, Turkey, and the UK disagreeing on official borders. Turkey, who has historic ties to the area, has long run the northern half of the country. Also, as part of the deal, Turkey is arguing that Turkish Cypriots should be granted EU membership, since they are technically located in the EU, although Turkey is not a member. Turkey took ownership after a 1974 invasion of Cyprus, which was triggered by a coup in Cyprus by Greek Cypriots, who tried to unite the island with Greece. Turkey still maintains 35,000 troops in northern Cyprus, which Greece and Cyprus oppose.
Volkswagen has pled guilty to 3 criminal charges in the U.S. over a conspiracy involving fake emissions tests. The company will pay fines totaling $4.3 billion, and 6 Volkswagen executives and managers were criminally charged for the incident. The fines are some of the biggest penalties ever for violating clean air laws. The case stems from a VW plan to sell 590,000 diesel engines in the U.S., which were fitted with a device that allowed it to cheat emissions tests. In addition to the fines, VW will be placed on probation for 3 years and will be overseen by an independent monitor in all its business deals in the U.S. VW was also charged with obstruction of justice for destroying documents that revealed their scheme. In addition to criminal fines, Volkswagen will also pay $15 billion to environmental authorities as a civil settlement. The company still faces further private lawsuits by investors and European car buyers. U.S. authorities say that the company had been running the conspiracy for about 10 years, which is about twice as long as the average Volkswagen runs. And it's not only Volkswagen that's been up to some shadiness. The EPA also accused Fiat Chrysler of cheating diesel emissions by using special software. Fiat Chrysler is accused of using the software in its Jeep Grand Cherokees and Dodge Rams from 2014 to 2016. The company denied the allegations, saying it was disappointed in the EPA's finding, but the disappointment didn't stop a 13% plunge in the company's stock price. The Justice Department is investigating alongside the EPA and could result in civil penalties for Fiat Chrysler.
Yesterday marked the confirmation hearings for some Donald Trump cabinet appointees. First up was James Mad Dog Mattis, Trump's pick for defense secretary, who sailed through the confirmation like he was just passing through. Mattis laid into Russia, warning that NATO is under its biggest attack since World War II. He repeatedly condemned Vladimir Putin, pulling away from Trump's friendly postures towards Russia. He claimed that Putin is trying to divide NATO so he can continue to conquer land in Eastern Europe. Mike Pompeo, chosen by Trump as director of the CIA, struck a similar note. Pompeo also condemned Russia. He said that they've done nothing to stop ISIS from spreading in Syria, directly contradicting statements by Trump, who said that Russia was having a positive effect in Syria. Both nominees also condemned acts of torture by intelligence agencies, another Trump talking point. On the campaign trail, Trump said that he would bring back waterboarding and other methods of torture on ISIS militants. Pompeo said that he supports the statement that the CIA is out of the enhanced interrogation business, which is a euphemism used for overseas torture. Mattis's situation was tricky because by law, he's not supposed to be able to serve as Secretary of Defense. Under U.S. law, military officers must wait 7 years before they can run the Pentagon. Mattis was only retired for 3 years. However, Congress passed a waiver voting 24-3 in order to allow Mattis to serve. If confirmed by the committee, Mattis will be summoned to Trump's office, where he will be waterboarded to test his loyalty.
Ben Carson, Trump's pick for Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, also sat for his confirmation today. His hearing was dominated by questions involving Trump's business and conflicts of interest. Senator Elizabeth Warren repeatedly asked Carson if Trump's business stands to benefit from housing funds from the department. The perpetually sleepy Carson seemed confused at times, continually refusing the questions from the fiery senator. He finally said that it's possible that funds would benefit Trump, but they would also benefit others, like, say, Donald Trump's sons. Carson said it wouldn't be right to eliminate a program simply because the president stands to also profit. But Warren persisted, raising the issue that Trump shouldn't be in a position to profit from government policies. She has called for Trump to completely divest from his business. At a press conference on Wednesday, Trump said he wouldn't divest, but would rather leave his business in a trust run by his 2 sons. Carson was then questioned about his complete lack of experience in government. He was asked how he plans to run a gigantic government bureau with no management background. But at this point, Carson began lightly snoring, and the committee decided to leave him in peace, tucking a pillow under his neck for comfort. Senator Mike Rounds took over and defended Carson's history as an accomplished neurosurgeon. He said that if Carson can understand brain surgery, then he could understand a government agency.
Senators Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham introduced legislation that would cut off funding if the United Nations goes ahead with a proposal to condemn Israel over its illegal settlement activity. The bill would delay UN funds until the president confirms reversal of the UN resolution, which dubbed the Israeli expansion as illegal. Cruz said that President Obama betrayed a loyal ally by agreeing to the proposal. The U.S. abstained from the vote, but hasn't spoken out against the ruling. Both Republican and Democratic lawmakers urged the U.S. to use their veto power to stop the vote, but Obama refused. Graham said that allowing the vote to go through was a, quote, slap at Israel. Also last week, the House voted 342 to 80 to denounce the UN ruling. The Senate has drafted their own resolution backed by 68 senators, but it hasn't yet come up for a vote.
The robot apocalypse could be taking a big step forward for robot kind if the European Parliament gets its way. The group is drafting a set of regulations that would grant robots a kind of electronic personhood to ensure rights and responsibilities for AI technology. In a 17-2 vote, the committee passed the report, which now leads to a possible framework for a law. The law would be similar to corporate personhood, which allows corporations to donate unlimited amounts to campaign funds. The EU is looking 10 to 15 years in the future when AI is predicted to be so advanced that robots will have thinking capabilities. The report suggested an agency for robotics and AI, a clear definition of smart autonomous robots with a registration system, and a code of conduct for robots. It also outlined regulation for self-driving vehicles, which have already begun to operate in major U.S. cities. Finally, the report investigated the effect that AI would have on the general public. It outlined a system of basic income for people who are put out of a job due to automation. Another issue raised involved patents. Ashley Morgan, an international lawyer, presented a scenario where a robot creates a patented invention and asks who then owns the patent, the human or the robot. So in 15 years, we could live in a world where robots have the rights of personhood and with that, the ability to contribute to elections. Already, robots are gearing up for the 2030 campaign of Technotronic X, a robot that opposes human integration, income taxes, and seeks to conquer the Earth. This was Luke Goodhart
And Joel Foster for 5 on 20 News.
Next up, Joel shares his take on the recent media maelstrom.
Welcome to This Week in Mediocrity, where we present you with all the best and the worst of the media. I'm your host, Joel Foster, and I never thought I would hear golden showers mentioned so much in one week. I didn't want to write about Donald Trump this week. I planned to cover Israel, but like a herpes infection, the Donald came calling again. But even for Trump's America, this week was weird. It all began Tuesday night when CNN and BuzzFeed reported on a 2-page memo added onto the intelligence report that was shown to Trump and Obama last Friday. Let me start by saying the report hasn't been verified and it isn't proven that this was shown to them. And I have to say that because what the report contains is shocking and uncomfortable enough that I would hate to be a parent having to explain why there won't be a President Trump. That is, if this all turns out to be true. All right, you've probably all heard about the golden showers, so let me start there. The report says that Trump paid 2 prostitutes to play water sports on a hotel bed. See, he is a job creator after all. The weirdest part is that the bed supposedly was where President Obama once slept on in a visit from years before. Oddly enough, the presidency won't be the first time that Trump's pissed on Obama's bed. But the major section of the report deals with Russia's attempts to put Trump into the presidency. It says that they've been grooming him for the position for about 5 years and commissioned a disinformation campaign and a hacking campaign to get him in there. Russia is also alleged to have convinced Trump to ignore the Ukraine on the campaign trail so that they can keep their little war crime wonderland going. In return, Trump would instead criticize NATO, which has turned out to be exactly what Trump has been doing. Let's take a look.
Mr. Trump, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here tonight. Mr. Trump, in a recent interview with the Washington Post, you said that the U.S. should become a diminishing presence in NATO.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that the U.S. should start to withdraw their world presence from NATO, and what would you change about the organization so that we could remain involved?
Okay. I did two basic and very large interviews recently. I did the New York Times, which treated me unbelievably fairly, and there was a front-page story on Sunday, I think, and it was a great story, and part of it was NATO, and the other was the Washington Post, where I
think
said...
you talked to them longer than any other candidate, by the way, or on the Republican
I spoke to the
side.
Times longer? Well, I spoke to him a long time. David, he's a very talented writer, actually, and they treated me very fairly. I also did the Washington Post, where I said very similar things and very similar things about NATO. Let me tell you, NATO is obsolete. It was 67 years, or it's over 60 years old. It is, many countries, doesn't cover terrorism, okay? It covers the Soviet Union, which is no longer in existence. And NATO has to either be rejiggered, changed for the better. I'm not saying the other thing that's bad about NATO, we're paying too much. We're spending a tremendous billions and billions of dollars on NATO.
You're saying it's obsolete, though. You have now Vladimir Putin invading Crimea, annexing part of Ukraine, annexing Crimea.
Let me tell you about Ukraine. First of all,
there are a lot of people who believe NATO is more important than it's been in years.
You have countries that surround Ukraine. They don't talk. They don't seem to have a problem. I'm not saying go in. I'd say you be very strong. You could be strong without necessarily even being into NATO, the money we spend.
Thanks for clarifying, Donnie. Man, if only those countries around the Ukraine could meet and talk. We could call it NATO. Now, the report was just the appetizer. What should have been an earth-shattering, crushing blow to any mere mortal, Donald instead turned it around and destroyed mass media instead. In a single one-hour press conference, Donald Trump proved to be more damaging to journalism than the internet, Breitbart, and the Weekly World News combined. Not sure how you know a corpse is gay, but watch how he lashed out at CNN during the press conference on Wednesday.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking
categorically,
a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
President Obama.
Since then, rather than sticking together, the media turned on each other. NBC published reports that conflicted with CNN and BuzzFeed. The network said that they talked to an intelligence official who called the report disinformation. Who was the official? Maybe an official from the KISS Army. The thing is, we have no idea. On the same show, MSNBC host Chuck Todd, gave the business to BuzzFeed editor-in-chief Ben Smith. Let's take a look.
The job of reporters in 2017. That makes me think this is a decision you would not have made the same decision in the pre-Trump era.
Oh, no, I'm not really referring to the pre-Trump era. I think more the pre-internet era. I mean, I think there was an era, and I think there are reasons for us to be nostalgic for it, reasons for us to have issues with it, where we could act as gatekeepers, where we could say, you know what, crazy people are claiming that Barack Obama's birth certificate is forged, but we're not gonna write about that. That's crazy. And I remember, if you remember, we were both there during Obama's first campaign. That was at first the approach, and then you see these things spread, and you have to engage them. And I think there was an era when you would be the gatekeeper for information. You would say to your audience, trust us. We're keeping things from you. We have lots of secrets we're not telling you, but you should trust us. I think you could say that was a good era. You could say that was a bad era. That is not the present day. And so I guess I think that, so there were, and in that context, I'd say there were really two reasons that we did decide to publish this. And we, like many other organizations, had it for weeks, had reporters in Europe and the United States trying to stand up or knock down specific details. But this was a document that was not just circulating at the highest levels of the intelligence community, the most powerful intelligence officials in the country, referring to it in briefings to the President of the United States, the President-elect, reportedly, disputedly. The political elite, top elected officials, the Gang of Eight, John McCain saw it. Certainly the media elite had it. And I think And didn't just have it, we're starting to act on it. Harry Reid had written a letter referring to it. And I think when you have an object that is in play, that is having consequences for the way our elected leaders are acting, you do have to ask the question of why should I suppress that? There are then good reasons, right? Once, though, it emerges, as it did last night, that in the public conversation that there is this secret document floating around full of dark allegations that we will not repeat to you, that I feel like in this era you really have to show your readers what that is in an appropriate context. In our original report, I mean, if you read what we wrote, it stressed that there were real solid reasons to distrust this. It noted 2 specific errors.
All right, but you talk about context and you talk about putting the responsibility on the readers, but at the same time, don't you have a responsibility of not spreading false information? Are you knowingly spreading false information?
I mean, I think as with the Obama birth certificate thing during the Obama campaign, this is an incredibly difficult balance that everybody in our business navigates every day.
But you're not publishing a false, you're not publishing.
You are quoting people saying.
I understand, but did you publish a false birth certificate?
We certainly quoted the President-elect of the United States making false claims about it. And years ago, we debated whether we should quote regular citizens in Iowa saying, I don't believe his birth certificate. And I remember us thinking at first, we probably shouldn't, that we shouldn't pass that on, and then saying, you know what, this has become a force that is impacting the conversation. The information environment, fake news, are now they're factors in the conversation.
But haven't you just participated? I mean, look, the fake news thing has turned into this,
I think different kinds of information.
Didn't you just, and I'm sure, I know this was not your intent. I've known you a long time. But you just published fake news.
We just published a dossier. No, I think that's a really...
Why is why is that an unfair description?
I think people love to throw the term fake news around to diminish anything they don't like. But I think this was a real story about a real document that was really being passed around between the very top officials of this country. And then the question you say is, okay, it's okay for you, Chuck Todd, to see this document. It's okay for me to see it. Okay for John McCain. Okay for the CIA. Why is it not okay for your audience? Or why is it, like, which of your audience members are you comfortable showing it to? And I think when people are, as Harry Reid did, top officials are making, not just seeing it, making decisions based on it, it is appropriate to tell your audience and to respect the fact that they can say this looks like nonsense.
All right, I gotta say, the term fake news got played out faster than parachute pants. The problem here is that no one knows who to believe anymore. By being so dishonest, so incredible, Donald Trump somehow was able to kill the concept of credibility. On the conservative site, The Weekly Standard, they published an article that tried to prove the Trump report was fake. Their main argument was that it came from a former British intelligence officer, Chris Steele, who worked for a private intelligence company. They argued that this guy isn't credible, and since he was paid by Trump's opposition, they have even less credibility. But in the past week, we've seen Julian Assange, Vladimir Putin, Lance Armstrong, all quoted as credible sources. So credibility lost credibility. That's so meta, bro. Ironically, The Weekly Standard argued that the report is fake for the very same reason why we should doubt NBC's disinformation claim. The Standard said we can't confirm who wrote the memos. Maybe a senior intelligence official wrote it. And the rift in the media continued. New York Magazine said that Trump owned the media at the press conference and made fools of CNN. And they're kind of right, he did. But this isn't a good thing. Before I move on, I want to step back a bit and talk about a book, because I like to kill momentum. I figure start with the golden showers, move on to a book review, right? The book is called This Town. It was written by veteran New York Times reporter Mark Leibowitz. In it, he talks about the parasitic relationship between the DC press and the political world. Basically, politicians rely on journalists to make them look good, and journalists depend on politicians for inside information. It's like bloodsuckers feeding on bloodsuckers, stuck in an endless loop of ego. But there's a reason why I'm telling you about the book, and it's not to give you a glimpse into my exciting social life. The main point here is that journalists have to kiss up to the current administration and the bigwigs so they'll have sources for their stories. If they make enemies with the big players in Washington, then they get shut out. And this is what's happening with CNN and BuzzFeed right now. They're getting blacklisted. NBC, on the other hand, may be kissing up, maybe because they got beat to the punch. We don't know. But they also invest in BuzzFeed, so if the report turns out to be true, they also kind of win. So it's a smart move on their part. But what about the report? we seem to be forgetting that we should probably find out if it's true or not. If Russia is controlling Donald Trump like a puppet made of pudding and carrot cake, I'd like to know either way, if only to finally have real life turn into an 80s action movie. But here's the thing about the report. It might be true, it might not be true. Personally, I haven't made a decision yet. But as much as I really, 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 really want it to be true, I also kind of don't want it to be true. And it's not because what will happen to Trump. I don't care about that. But I'm afraid of what's going to happen afterwards in the country. Because you know what Trump will say. He's already got the tweet ready to go. And Breitbart will say the same thing. Probably some conspiracy. They probably already have the article ready to go. And if you've ever been on Breitbart, you know that those are some angry people. And they have lots of guns. So for the sake of saving the country from apocalypse, I sort of, but not really, hope the report is fake news. All right, that's all the time I have for today. Catch me next week with another installment of This Week in Mediocrity. I am Joel Foster. Thank you for watching.